"Let me go. I'll do whatever you want." The Apache woman begged the Western rancher. The hot sun beat down on the dry, endless plains of the West. Dust rose in small clouds as the wind carried it across the open land. Birds circled high above, searching for prey or shelter, while the faint sound of cattle lowing in distant fields filled the air. It was a land of extremes, harsh, unforgiving, and beautiful in its own rough way. For those who lived here, life was a constant struggle, a test of strength, courage, and willpower. Amid this vast landscape, a young Apache woman moved cautiously through the tall, sun-browned grass. Her footsteps were soft, deliberate, and careful, as if she feared that any noise might betray her presence. Her eyes, dark and alert, scanned the horizon. She had traveled far, and the journey had left her tired, hungry, and wary of strangers. She had been running from danger, though not from the land itself. She loved the plains, the freedom they gave her people, the open skies, and the whisper of the wind through the sagebrush. But the world beyond her village had grown dangerous, and she had learned that trust was a fragile thing, one that could break at any moment. She carried little with her, just a small bundle of belongings wrapped in cloth, and the memories of a life that had changed overnight. Her people had faced hardship, as they always did, but recent events had pushed her further than she had ever gone before. She remembered the fear in the eyes of her family when they had warned her not to leave the village. She remembered the harsh voices of those who said the world outside was no place for a woman alone. And now, walking through the dry grass, she understood the truth of their words. The plains were beautiful, but they were also filled with unseen dangers, and a single misstep could bring disaster. Hours passed as she moved carefully, avoiding the wide tracks of wagons and cattle that crisscrossed the land. She had learned to read the signs of the plains: the bent grass where a large animal had passed, the scattered stones that suggested human activity, the distant smoke rising from a campfire. Each observation was a measure of her survival, a small piece of knowledge that kept her one step ahead of trouble. Yet, despite her awareness, a growing unease gnawed at her. Something in the air felt different. The wind had shifted, carrying with it a scent she did not recognize. It was not the smell of other people from her village, nor the familiar scent of her own people. It was something foreign, a marker of the unknown. Her intuition was sharp. She slowed her pace, crouching low behind a rise in the terrain. From her vantage point, she could see the outline of a building in the distance, a ranch house, with wooden fences stretching around it, enclosing cattle that grazed lazily. Smoke rose from a chimney, signaling the presence of people. Her heart skipped a beat. She had heard stories of ranchers in these parts, men who claimed the land as their own, who followed their own rules, and who had little patience for anyone they considered outsiders. Approaching this place could be dangerous. She knew that she needed food, water, and shelter, but she also knew that asking for these things could put her in grave danger. As she considered her options, a figure appeared on the porch of the ranch house. The man was tall, broad-shouldered, and dressed in the rugged clothes of a rancher. A hat shaded his eyes, but she could sense his gaze sweeping the land, assessing it, taking in every detail. There was a commanding presence about him, a strength that came from years of surviving in a world that demanded toughness. He carried a rifle casually in one hand, not as a threat but as a tool, a symbol of the life he led. His posture was confident, measured, the kind of confidence that came from knowing one's place in the world and being unwilling to surrender it easily. The woman knew that her next steps would determine everything. She could continue hiding, risk exhaustion and exposure in the harsh sun, or she could reveal herself, hoping that the man might show mercy. Hunger and thirst gnawed at her, and she realized that she could not continue without help. Her pride battled with her need, but survival won. She stepped out from behind the rise and raised her hand slightly in a gesture of peace, careful not to appear threatening. The rancher's eyes narrowed as he spotted her. He studied her carefully, noting her small frame, the way she carried herself, and the anxiety in her movements. There was caution in his expression, but also curiosity. Outsiders were rare in these parts, and someone moving alone across the plains naturally drew attention. The woman took a deep breath, steadying herself, and spoke in a voice that trembled but was clear. "Please, I mean no harm," she said. "I only need food and water. I will leave, I promise." The rancher's gaze softened slightly, though he remained wary. He had seen desperation before, and he understood that it could take many forms. Some people lied to survive, others told the truth in moments of need. His mind weighed the possibilities, considering the risks of offering aid to a stranger in a land where trust was scarce. Still, he sensed something in her, the fear, the honesty, the humanity that made him hesitate. "You're far from home," he said finally, his voice low and steady. "You shouldn't be out here alone." The woman nodded, relief washing over her briefly. I had no choice," she said. "I didn't know where else to go. Please, I'll do whatever you want. Just let me have food and water." The rancher studied her for a moment longer, the wind rustling the grass around them. He had grown up on this land, learning the ways of the plains from his father and grandfather. He knew the rules of survival, the delicate balance between caution and compassion. Extending trust could be dangerous, but he also understood the cost of denying it. In a place where life was harsh and unforgiving, a small act of kindness could make all the difference. After a pause, he spoke again. "Come inside, sit by the fire, eat something." A surge of gratitude swept through the woman. She bowed her head slightly, careful to show respect, and followed the rancher toward the house. Each step felt heavy but hopeful, a mixture of fear and relief. The wooden porch creaked under their weight, and the scent of smoke, cooked meat, and leather filled the air. Inside, the house was modest but well kept, a reflection of the man's diligence and care. As she ate, she tried not to draw too much attention to herself, yet she felt the tension slowly ease. The rancher did not press her for explanations, but she could sense that he was observing, judging, and perhaps wondering about her story. She wanted to share everything, her journey, her fears, her past, but she knew better than to reveal too much too soon. Trust was earned, not given freely. Outside, the sun continued its slow descent, painting the plains in shades of gold and orange. Shadows lengthened, and the wind whispered secrets through the grass. The woman felt a fragile sense of safety, a small respite from the dangers that had haunted her journey. Yet she also knew that this moment was temporary, that the world beyond the walls of the ranch was still full of uncertainty. She would need to be careful, to navigate each step with caution and intelligence. The rancher, for his part, felt a quiet shift within himself. He had faced many challenges in his life, yet something about this encounter stirred thoughts he had not expected. Compassion, curiosity, and responsibility intertwined in ways he had not anticipated. He realized that his actions in the coming days would matter, not just for the woman but for himself, for the principles he believed in, and for the unpredictable future that lay across the plains. As night fell, the two sat in relative silence, the crackling fire providing warmth and light. The woman's fears had not vanished, but they had softened. She knew that she had survived the first challenge of the day, but the journey was far from over. In the quiet of the ranch house, amid the vastness of the plains, both the woman and the rancher sensed that their lives had been altered by this chance meeting. The road ahead would be uncertain, filled with choices that could shape their fates in unexpected ways. For the first time in many days, the woman felt a small spark of hope. She realized that even in a world filled with hardship, danger, and uncertainty, there were moments of humanity, kindness, and connection. And for the rancher, the encounter reminded him that strength was not only measured by survival or authority, but also by the ability to show compassion, to understand another person's struggle, and to make choices guided by both wisdom and heart. The plain stretched endlessly outside the window, a reminder of the vast world beyond the ranch. But inside, a fragile bond had begun to form, a bond that neither had expected, yet one that held the promise of lessons, growth, and shared humanity in a world that often tested both. And so, under the fading light of day, with the fire casting warm shadows on the walls, the first chapter of their story came to a quiet, yet significant pause. Neither knew what tomorrow would bring, but both understood that this encounter was only the beginning of a journey that would test their courage, their morals, and their very understanding of trust and survival in the rugged plains of the West. The next morning, the plains awoke. Under a soft golden light, the wind moved gently through the tall grass, carrying the faint scent of wildflowers and dust. Birds called to one another, and the distant lowing of cattle created a steady rhythm across the open land. The ranch house, quiet under the first rays of sunlight, seemed calm compared to the tension and uncertainty that had filled it just hours before. Inside, the Apache woman stirred, careful not to disturb the rancher who slept nearby. She had spent the night in a mixture of rest and anxious thought, replaying the events that had brought her here. Her mind wandered to her village, now far behind her. She remembered the elders' voices, full of worry and warning, urging her to be cautious in the outside world. She thought of her family, of friends and relatives who had faced hardships of their own, and of the long journey she had undertaken to escape danger and find a place of safety. Each memory brought a pang of longing and sadness, but also a determination to survive. She knew that every step she took from this moment forward mattered, that every choice could bring freedom or disaster. The rancher stirred as the sun climbed higher. He was an early riser, accustomed to the demands of life on the plains. Years of tending cattle, repairing fences, and navigating the unpredictable land had given him a routine that demanded discipline and attention. Yet this morning, there was a quiet unease in him. The presence of the woman in his home had created a tension that he could not ignore. He wondered about her story, about the hardships that had led her to his doorstep. Questions filled his mind. Was she telling the truth? Could she be trusted? Was helping her worth the risk? Despite his doubts, he began the day with the practical tasks that could not be postponed. He stoked the fire in the kitchen, prepared breakfast, and checked on the cattle. Each movement was deliberate, his mind half focused on work, half on the stranger who now shared his home. He had lived a life that required self-reliance, a life that often demanded harsh choices. Yet, as he observed her quietly eating, a small sense of responsibility settled over him. She was vulnerable, alone, and far from help. He had the ability to provide care, even if temporary, and the thought of ignoring her need felt wrong. After breakfast, he stepped outside, giving her a moment of privacy and a chance to gather her thoughts. The woman took a deep breath, stepping carefully onto the porch. The air was crisp and clean, carrying the sounds of the plains in the early morning. She looked around, taking in the expanse of land, the distant hills, and the scattered trees. For a moment, she allowed herself to feel a sense of wonder. The world was harsh, yes, but it was also wide and full of possibilities. Her journey had brought her here, and while uncertainty remained, there was also hope. A fragile but present hope that she could find safety and perhaps even a sense of belonging, however temporary. The rancher returned, carrying a bucket of fresh water and a small loaf of bread. "You'll need to stay hydrated," he said simply, setting the items down before her. His tone was firm but not unkind. He had seen desperation before, and he understood that providing sustenance was often the first step toward trust. She nodded, accepting the offering with gratitude. The gesture, though small, carried weight. It was an acknowledgement that she was seen, that her presence mattered, and that someone recognized her need for help. As the morning progressed, the rancher began asking simple questions. "Where are you from?" he asked, his voice cautious. "Why are you traveling alone?" The woman hesitated. Sharing too much could be dangerous. She did not know this man well, did not yet trust him fully. Yet there was a recognition in his eyes, a subtle signal that he was not seeking to harm her, that he genuinely wanted to understand. Carefully, she spoke. She told him about her journey, about leaving her village, about the dangers she had faced along the way. She did not share every detail, but enough to convey her humanity, her struggles, and her determination to survive. The rancher listened attentively. He had seen many people on the plains, many stories of hardship and courage, but there was something different in her voice, something that made her experiences feel immediate and real. He felt a growing empathy, a sense that this woman had endured more than most could imagine. At the same time, he remained cautious. He knew that the world could be cruel and that appearances could be deceiving. He could offer assistance, but he could not let his guard down completely. As the day wore on, the two began a tentative rhythm. She helped with small chores, gathering firewood, feeding the smaller animals, tidying the house, while he attended to the demands of the ranch. The work provided a form of quiet companionship. They did not need to speak constantly. The shared effort created a sense of mutual understanding. She observed his careful attention to the land, the way he treated the animals with respect, the way he planned his tasks with thought and precision. In turn, he noticed her attentiveness, her quick learning, and the care she took in every action. Trust, fragile as it was, began to take root. Despite the growing understanding, the tension remained. The woman knew that her freedom was still uncertain. She had asked for help, but she had not been promised safety beyond the walls of the ranch. Each gesture of kindness from the rancher brought relief, yet also a reminder that the plains beyond were still full of danger. She remained vigilant, watching the horizon, noting the movement of people and animals, and keeping her instincts sharp. Survival required constant awareness, and she had learned long ago that complacency could be deadly. The rancher, too, felt the weight of responsibility. He had not been a man to show vulnerability easily, but this encounter forced him to reflect on his choices. He considered the risks of helping a stranger, the potential consequences for himself and his neighbors, and the moral questions that accompanied every decision. He realized that life on the plains was not only about survival, but also about character, empathy, and the courage to act with integrity, even when circumstances were uncertain. As the sun climbed higher, a subtle change occurred. The woman began to share more of her thoughts, her hopes, and her fears. She spoke of the people she had left behind, of the dreams she carried for a better life, and of the determination that had kept her moving forward despite exhaustion and danger. Her words were simple but powerful, and they resonated with the rancher. He felt a deepening respect, an acknowledgement that her journey was not just a physical struggle, but a testament to resilience and strength. By midday, the rancher decided to take her outside, to show her the land he cared for, and to provide her with some sense of perspective. They walked together among the cattle, through fields bordered by wooden fences, and along dusty trails that wound across the property. The woman observed the way he moved, the care he took with each task, and the knowledge he had of the land. She asked questions, curious about the animals, the plants, and the methods he used to manage the ranch. His answers were patient, clear, and instructive. In this simple exchange, a bond began to form, one built on shared effort, mutual respect, and the recognition of each other's skills and experiences. The afternoon brought its own challenges. A sudden gust of wind swept across the plains, carrying with it dust and small debris. Some of the cattle grew restless, and the rancher had to act quickly to maintain control. The woman assisted without hesitation, demonstrating quick thinking and an ability to adapt to the unexpected. The rancher was impressed. Her presence, once seen as a potential complication, was now proving valuable. Her determination, intelligence, and courage became evident, and he realized that she was not merely a survivor of circumstance, but an active participant in shaping her fate. By evening, the tension that had marked their first encounter had eased, replaced by a cautious sense of understanding. They returned to the ranch house, tired from the work and the exertion of the day. The woman prepared a simple meal with the ingredients available, while the rancher attended to the smaller chores that required attention before nightfall. Conversation flowed more naturally now, though still careful and respectful. Stories of the land, of past experiences, and of dreams for the future were shared in small fragments, creating a tapestry of human experience that bridged the gap between them. As the sun set, painting the sky in brilliant hues of orange, pink, and purple, both the woman and the rancher felt the significance of the day. It had been more than just a day of survival and chores. It had been a day of discovery, of observation, and of subtle connection. The plains, once a symbol of uncertainty and danger, had become a space where trust could be tested, where courage could be demonstrated, and where humanity could be recognized. That night, as they sat by the fire, the woman reflected on the unexpected kindness she had received. She knew that the road ahead would still be fraught with challenges, that her journey was far from over. Yet, she also understood that moments like this, rare and fragile, offered a glimpse of hope and a reminder that even in a harsh world, compassion could exist. For the rancher, the day had brought lessons as well. He had seen the strength of someone facing adversity, the power of resilience, and the subtle ways that trust and respect could be nurtured. He realized that his actions, small though they might seem, had the potential to make a significant difference in someone's life. And in that realization, he found a sense of purpose that went beyond the routines of the ranch, beyond the immediate demands of survival. The plains outside were quiet now, the stars beginning to appear in the darkening sky. The wind whispered through the grass, carrying the promise of another day, another set of challenges, and another chance for growth, understanding, and connection. Within the small ranch house, two people who had once been strangers now shared a fragile understanding, a bond formed through necessity, courage, and the willingness to recognize each other's humanity. And as the night deepened, both felt a sense of anticipation and uncertainty. The journey was far from over, the challenges ahead unknown, but the events of the day had laid the foundation for trust, respect, and perhaps even friendship. The story of the Apache woman and the Western rancher was only beginning, and the plains, vast and unforgiving, would test them both in ways they could not yet imagine. The next morning, the plains seemed calmer, though the warmth of the sun reminded everyone that life here demanded constant attention. The Apache woman awoke with a renewed sense of purpose. The events of the previous day had left her with both relief and a lingering tension. She had seen kindness in the rancher, yet she understood that the world beyond his walls was unpredictable and dangerous. Every decision mattered. Every action could change the course of her journey. She stepped outside carefully, her eyes scanning the horizon. The ranch was quiet, except for the soft movements of cattle grazing and the distant call of birds. There was a rhythm to the day, a natural flow that seemed almost comforting in its predictability. She took a deep breath, feeling the wind against her face, and tried to absorb the lessons of survival she had learned along the way. Her senses were alert. She noticed the bent grass that indicated a passing animal, the faint footprints in the dirt, and the movement of the clouds that might signal approaching weather. Every detail was important, every observation a small tool for survival. The rancher appeared soon after, carrying a bucket of water and some simple tools for the morning chores. He looked at her with a thoughtful expression, as though weighing how much to involve her in the work today. There was an unspoken understanding between them now, built from the trust that had begun to grow. It was fragile, but it existed. "Today, we'll start with the fences," he said, his voice steady but not harsh. "They need checking after yesterday's wind." The woman nodded. She was willing to help and to learn. The rancher watched her as she followed him, noting the careful way she moved, the way she observed each detail before acting. He began to recognize her intelligence, her quick thinking, and her ability to adapt. Each task, whether lifting a plank or fastening a post, showed him that she was more than a stranger in need. She was someone capable, resilient, and willing to work. As they worked side by side, conversation began to flow more easily. The woman asked about the rancher's life, how he came to own the land, and how he managed such a vast property. He answered simply, explaining the routines, challenges, and rewards of life on the plains. She listened carefully, absorbing not only his words but also the lessons embedded in them. The way he balanced work and observation, the care he showed for his animals, and the respect he held for the land itself. In turn, she shared fragments of her own story, careful to avoid details that might endanger her. She spoke of the people she had known, the lessons they had taught her, and the challenges she had faced on her journey. She did not ask for sympathy, nor did she dwell on hardships. Instead, she focused on the strength and determination she had discovered within herself. The rancher listened, his respect growing with every word. He recognized courage when he saw it, and she displayed it in every thoughtful action and measured step. By midday, the sun had climbed high, and the plains seemed to stretch endlessly under the bright light. They paused for a brief meal, sitting on a weathered log under the shade of a lone tree. The woman ate slowly, savoring the simple food, while the rancher watched her with a quiet awareness. He had seen many travelers come and go, many people seeking temporary aid, but there was something different about her. She was not simply asking for survival. She was seeking understanding, learning, and connection. And in her presence, he found himself reflecting on his own life, on the lessons he had learned, and on the choices that had shaped him. After eating, they continued their work. The rancher showed her how to handle the animals carefully, how to move them without causing stress, and how to observe their behavior for signs of illness or discomfort. She listened and watched, her hands steady and her mind attentive. She asked questions when she did not understand, demonstrating curiosity and a desire to learn. The rancher began to see that this was more than survival. This was preparation, training, and the development of skills that would serve her well in the future. As afternoon approached, a sudden movement in the distance caught their attention. A small group of travelers appeared along the horizon, riding horses in a steady line. The rancher's posture stiffened slightly, and the woman noticed the shift immediately. There was a tension in his gaze, a readiness that had not been present earlier. He did not speak at first, simply observing the riders, noting their speed, their formation, and their direction. The woman followed his lead, understanding instinctively that caution was required. The riders came closer, and the rancher stepped forward to meet them. He spoke in a firm, controlled voice, asking their purpose and assessing whether they posed a threat. The woman remained behind him, watching carefully, learning the subtle ways he communicated, controlled the situation, and balanced caution with diplomacy. It was a lesson in both survival and leadership, and she absorbed it fully. The travelers turned out to be harmless, a small group of ranchers from a neighboring property, seeking to share news of the region and exchange supplies. Relief washed over both the rancher and the woman. Yet the encounter was a reminder that the world outside the safety of the ranch was unpredictable. Trust could not be given blindly, and vigilance remained necessary. The woman felt a mix of gratitude and determination, understanding that every day brought lessons, risks, and opportunities for growth. After the travelers left, the rancher and the woman returned to their tasks. The rancher showed her how to repair a broken fence, guiding her hands carefully and explaining the purpose of each action. She followed his instructions with precision, her respect for his knowledge growing. He, in turn, admired her patience, her focus, and her willingness to learn. There was a rhythm to their work now, a harmony born of shared effort and mutual recognition. As the day wore on, the woman began to feel a deeper connection to the land. She observed the way the sunlight shifted across the plains, how the wind carried the scent of earth and grass, and how every living creature played a part in the balance of life. She realized that survival was not only about avoiding danger, but also about understanding the world around her, respecting it and working in harmony with it. The rancher, watching her attentiveness, felt a quiet pride. She was learning quickly, adapting and beginning to understand the values that had guided him for years. Evening approached, and the sky transformed into a tapestry of color, orange, pink, and deepening purple. The woman and the rancher walked along the edge of the property, checking the last of the fences and observing the animals as they settled for the night. The conversation was lighter now, filled with small stories, observations, and questions about the world. Laughter, soft and rare, punctuated the quiet moments, and a sense of companionship began to develop. Though cautious still, a bond was forming, one built on respect, shared experience, and the recognition of each other's strengths. That night, as they sat by the fire inside the ranch house, the woman reflected on the day. She had faced uncertainty, learned new skills, and observed the ways of the rancher, who had become both a guide and a protector. She felt a sense of accomplishment and growth, realizing that each challenge she faced strengthened her resolve and expanded her understanding of the world. For the first time in many days, she allowed herself a sense of hope, not a naive hope, but a steady, determined belief that she could continue, adapt, and survive. The rancher, for his part, reflected on the woman's resilience. He had always valued strength, courage, and intelligence, but seeing those qualities in someone so young and vulnerable brought a new perspective. He realized that teaching, guiding, and protecting her was not just a matter of necessity, but also a reflection of his own values. Compassion, patience, and understanding were as important as skill and strength, and he felt a growing admiration for her ability to meet the challenges of the plains with courage and clarity. Night deepened, and the fire's warmth filled the room. Shadows danced across the walls, creating a comforting yet mysterious atmosphere. Outside, the plains were quiet, the stars twinkling overhead, and the wind carrying a promise of another day, full of challenges, lessons, and possibilities. Within the ranch house, the woman and the rancher shared a quiet companionship, a recognition that even in a harsh, unpredictable world, trust, respect, and understanding could form between two people from different worlds. As sleep approached, both reflected on the growing bond between them. It was fragile, uncertain, and newly formed, yet it carried the promise of guidance, protection, and mutual growth. They understood that tomorrow would bring new challenges, decisions, and moments of learning. But for now, they allowed themselves a small measure of peace, knowing that each day brought them closer to understanding, trust, and perhaps even the beginnings of friendship. The plains outside remained vast and wild, but inside the small ranch house, the Apache woman and the Western rancher had discovered a space of safety, learning, and cautious connection. And as the night deepened, both felt the quiet strength of a bond that had begun not from ease or comfort, but from shared challenge, respect, and the unspoken acknowledgement of each other's courage. The next morning, the plains were filled with a bright, clear light. The wind blew steadily, carrying the scent of earth, grass, and distant smoke. The Apache woman rose early, feeling a mix of determination and nervousness. The previous days had been filled with work, learning, and careful observation. She had begun to understand the rhythms of the ranch, the ways of the rancher, and the patterns of life on the plains. But today felt different. There was a tension in the air, a subtle warning that the routine of survival could be interrupted at any moment. She prepared herself silently, gathering small tools and checking her few belongings. The rancher appeared on the porch, carrying a rope and a set of supplies for the morning chores. His expression was serious, though not harsh. There was a weight in his eyes, a sense that something was approaching that might demand their full attention and skill. He nodded toward the woman, signaling that today would not be like the others. As they worked side by side, fixing fences and tending to the cattle, a sudden movement on the horizon caught their attention. Dust rose in the distance, and the sound of hoofbeats grew steadily louder. The rancher stiffened, his eyes narrowing as he studied the approaching figures. The woman noticed the change immediately, recognizing instinctively that this was not a friendly visit. Her heart pounded, but she did not panic. She had learned to stay calm under pressure, to observe before acting, and to trust her instincts. The figures came closer, an unfamiliar group of riders, their faces covered with scarves, moving quickly but with clear intent. The rancher stepped forward, calling out to them with a commanding voice, assessing their intentions. The woman stayed slightly behind him, watching and listening carefully. She saw the subtle movements in the rancher's posture, the way he held himself ready but not aggressive, and she mirrored his calm approach. The riders slowed as they neared, revealing that they were not strangers seeking help, but a group of men attempting to intimidate. They demanded supplies and attempted to assert control over the ranch. The rancher remained firm, refusing to comply with threats while keeping his tone steady and unprovocative. He had dealt with trouble before and knew that any sudden movement could escalate the situation. The woman observed closely, learning the delicate balance between authority and caution. She saw how the rancher used his words to assert control, how his stance projected confidence, and how small gestures could signal both strength and restraint. It was a lesson in leadership and survival under pressure, one that would be invaluable in her own journey. As tension grew, one of the riders tried to push further, attempting to move past the rancher. The woman noticed the shift immediately and instinctively reached for a nearby tool, prepared to defend herself if necessary. The rancher caught her movement with a sharp glance and shook his head slightly, signaling patience. He knew that sudden action could provoke violence. They stood together, a quiet but firm presence, refusing to give in to intimidation. After a tense few moments, the riders, realizing they could not overpower the rancher, turned away, leaving the ranch in peace. The woman let out a slow breath she hadn't realized she had been holding. She felt a mixture of relief and admiration. The rancher had handled the situation with skill, courage, and wisdom, and she had witnessed firsthand the importance of composure and strategy in the face of danger. Once the immediate threat had passed, the rancher led her back to the house. They worked quietly, repairing fences that had been loosened during the commotion, and checking on the cattle to ensure none had been startled or harmed. The woman helped without hesitation, her hands steady and her mind focused. She felt a sense of pride in her abilities and in the small contributions she could make. By afternoon, the adrenaline of the morning had settled, and they took a moment to rest. Sitting in the shade of a tree, the rancher spoke quietly, explaining why he had acted as he did, how he assessed the threat, and the importance of patience and observation. The woman listened intently, absorbing every detail. She realized that courage was not simply about confronting danger, but also about knowing when to act, when to wait, and how to protect oneself and others through wisdom as well as strength. As the day progressed, the rancher suggested they work together on a new project, a small section of the ranch that needed clearing and repair after a storm had passed a few days earlier. The task required cooperation, careful planning, and the ability to adapt to changing conditions. The woman embraced the challenge, using the skills she had learned and applying them with growing confidence. The rancher guided her, offered advice, and encouraged her independence, allowing her to take initiative while remaining ready to assist when necessary. While they worked, conversation flowed more freely than before. They spoke of dreams and aspirations, of lessons learned from life, and of the values that guided them. The woman shared her hope for freedom and safety, her desire to find a place where she could live without fear. The rancher spoke of the plains, the importance of integrity, and the sense of responsibility he felt toward those who relied on him. In their words, a deeper understanding of each other's experiences and perspectives emerged. Trust, once fragile, began to solidify. Evening approached, and the sky turned brilliant shades of orange and purple. The two walked along the edge of the property, checking the progress of the day's work and observing the animals as they settled for the night. The woman noticed subtle changes in the landscape, the way shadows stretched across the plains, the movement of the clouds, and the sounds of wildlife preparing for darkness. She realized that survival required constant attention not only to danger, but also to the rhythm and patterns of life around her. That night, as they sat by the fire inside the ranch house, the woman reflected on the events of the day. She had faced uncertainty, observed courage in action, and participated actively in the protection and maintenance of the ranch. She felt a growing sense of competence, confidence, and understanding. Her respect for the rancher deepened, not only for his strength but also for his wisdom, patience, and ability to teach. The rancher, too, reflected on her growth. He had seen resilience, intelligence, and courage in her actions. She had remained calm in moments of danger, asked thoughtful questions, and demonstrated a willingness to learn. He realized that his guidance and protection were shaping someone capable of navigating the world with skill and awareness. In her presence, he found not only a sense of duty but also admiration and hope. Outside, the plains were quiet, and the stars began to appear in the darkening sky. The wind whispered through the grass, carrying a promise of challenges and lessons to come. Within the small ranch house, the woman and the rancher shared a sense of quiet accomplishment. They had faced danger together, learned from one another, and strengthened a bond that was both practical and emotional. As the night deepened, the woman felt a quiet determination settle within her. She understood that the journey ahead would not be easy, that challenges would continue to appear, and that her strength, intelligence, and courage would be tested again and again. Yet she also recognized that she was not entirely alone, that there was someone willing to guide, protect, and teach her. In this realization, she found hope, a sense of purpose, and the courage to face what lay ahead. The rancher, watching her quietly, understood the value of this partnership. He realized that life on the plains was not only about surviving the elements or facing threats, but also about recognizing character, nurturing talent, and building trust through shared experience. He felt a quiet pride in her growth, and a sense of responsibility for the continued guidance of someone capable and determined. As the fire burned low and the night air cooled, both reflected on the lessons of the day. They had faced danger, learned from one another, and adapted to the challenges presented by both the land and other people. Their bond, formed in necessity, had grown into mutual respect, understanding, and recognition of each other's abilities. The journey they shared was far from over, but the foundation had been laid for trust, cooperation, and shared resilience. Outside, the plains stretched endlessly, wild and unpredictable, yet within the ranch house, two lives intersected in ways that would shape their futures. The Apache woman had proven her courage and intelligence, while the rancher had demonstrated patience, skill, and compassion. Together, they had faced a test that strengthened both of them, preparing them for the trials yet to come. And as sleep approached, both felt the quiet strength of partnership. They knew that tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities, and new lessons. But tonight, they allowed themselves a moment of peace, reflecting on the growth, understanding, and resilience that had been built through shared effort, courage, and respect. The plains remained vast and wild, but inside the small ranch house, a bond had formed that could endure the trials ahead. Through patience, courage, and mutual respect, The Apache woman and the Western rancher had begun a journey that would test them in ways they could not yet imagine, preparing them for the challenges, choices, and moments of humanity that lay ahead. The morning sun rose slowly over the plains, casting golden light on the rolling hills and the quiet ranch below. The Apache woman woke with a sense of purpose and anticipation. The events of the past days had taught her resilience, patience, and the importance of trust. She had learned from the rancher, grown in confidence, and begun to feel capable of facing challenges she once thought impossible. Yet today, she sensed that the journey would take another step, one that might define the future for both of them. The rancher, as always, was already up, checking the cattle and the fences. He noticed her quietly observing the routines of the ranch, learning not only the physical tasks but also the subtle signs of the land. He could see how much she had grown, how her confidence had strengthened, and how she had begun to anticipate problems before they arose. His respect for her had deepened into admiration, and he realized that she was no longer just someone to protect. She was a partner in navigating the challenges of the plains. The peaceful morning was soon interrupted by movement on the horizon. A small group of riders approached, their horses kicking up dust. The rancher stiffened, instinctively moving closer to the woman, though not in a threatening way. He had learned long ago that preparation and observation were key to handling uncertainty. The woman, now more aware and confident, stood beside him calmly. She had learned to watch, to read the signs, and to trust her instincts, and she mirrored his readiness without panic. As the riders drew nearer, it became clear that they were neighbors from a nearby ranch, coming to discuss grazing arrangements and share information about the region. Relief washed over both the rancher and the woman. Yet the encounter reminded them that the world beyond the safety of the ranch was unpredictable. Trust was earned, communication was essential, and every decision could affect the outcome of the day. After the visitors departed, the rancher and the woman returned to their work. Together, they repaired a section of the fence damaged by recent weather, guided the cattle to fresh grazing areas, and ensured that the property was secure. The woman moved with efficiency, demonstrating the skills she had learned over the past days. She asked questions when needed, showing curiosity and a desire to understand the ranch's operations thoroughly. The rancher provided guidance, encouragement, and gentle corrections, allowing her independence while remaining ready to assist. As the sun climbed higher, the two walked along the edge of the property, observing the vast plains stretching endlessly before them. The woman began to share more of her story, carefully recounting the journey that had brought her here. She spoke of her family, her village, and the dangers she had faced along the way. The rancher listened intently, his mind absorbing not just the details, but the strength and determination behind each experience. He understood that she had faced adversity far beyond what most could imagine, and he respected her even more for the courage she had shown. By midday, a sudden storm began to form over the distant hills. Clouds darkened the sky, and the wind picked up, carrying the scent of rain and the promise of a challenging afternoon. The rancher quickly assessed the situation and instructed the woman to help secure the animals and equipment. Together, they moved efficiently, tying down supplies, bringing in the cattle, and preparing for the storm. The woman's confidence and quick thinking proved invaluable, as she anticipated needs and acted decisively. The rancher watched her with pride, realizing how much she had grown since their first meeting. The storm arrived with intensity, rain lashing against the roof and wind bending the trees. Inside the ranch house, the two worked together, monitoring the animals and ensuring that nothing was damaged. They communicated with calm efficiency, a rhythm formed through shared experience and trust. The woman realized that the lessons she had learned, observation, patience, courage, and cooperation, were now part of her instinctive response. She was no longer simply surviving, She was thriving in the face of adversity. When the storm finally passed, the plains were transformed. The air smelled of fresh rain, the grass glistened with droplets, and the sky cleared to reveal soft light. The rancher and the woman stepped outside, taking in the renewal that followed the storm. There was a sense of accomplishment, not just for having weathered the elements, but for having done so together, relying on one another's strengths and insights. The woman felt a profound sense of gratitude, both for the lessons learned and for the bond that had formed between them. The afternoon was spent repairing minor damage from the storm, tending to the animals, and preparing a meal. As they worked, conversation flowed more freely than ever before. They spoke of hopes, dreams, and the future, discussing how the plains could be both a place of danger and a place of opportunity. The woman shared her desire to find a safe home, a place where she could live with dignity and security. The rancher spoke of the importance of the land, the value of integrity, and the sense of purpose he found in protecting and guiding those who relied on him. As evening approached, the two sat on the porch, watching the sun sink below the horizon. The plains glowed with shades of orange, pink, and purple, and the wind carried the soft sounds of nature settling for the night. The woman felt a sense of peace she had not experienced in a long time. The harshness of the world had not disappeared, but she now understood that trust, cooperation, and respect could create pockets of safety and hope, even in the most challenging circumstances. The rancher reflected on the journey they had shared. He realized that in helping the woman, he had also learned about patience, empathy, and the power of guiding someone with respect rather than authority alone. He understood that courage was not only about facing danger, but also about nurturing growth, offering protection when necessary, and recognizing strength in others. He had seen her transform from a cautious, uncertain traveler into a confident, capable individual ready to face challenges on her own. That night, as the stars appeared in the clear sky above the plains, the rancher and the woman shared a quiet moment of reflection. They spoke of the lessons learned, the experiences that had shaped them, and the bond that had formed between them. Though their worlds were different, one rooted in the traditions of the Apache, the other in the rugged life of the western plains, they had found understanding, trust, and mutual respect. The woman realized that her journey was not over, but she now possessed the skills, knowledge, and confidence to continue. She felt empowered, knowing that she could navigate the challenges ahead with courage and wisdom. The rancher recognized that his guidance had made a lasting impact, and he felt a quiet pride in her growth and resilience. Their experiences together had created a bridge between their worlds, showing that understanding and humanity could flourish even in the most difficult circumstances. As the night deepened, both reflected on the unpredictable nature of life on the plains. The storms, the travelers, the challenges, they were all part of a world that demanded adaptability, strength, and courage. Yet, within that world, moments of connection, trust, and shared effort offered light, hope, and guidance. The Apache woman and the rancher had discovered that even in a harsh and unforgiving environment, human kindness, wisdom, and courage could create paths forward. In the quiet of the ranch house, with the plains stretching endlessly beyond, the woman and the rancher understood the significance of their journey together. It was a story of growth, resilience, and trust. She had faced fear and uncertainty, learned to rely on her instincts, and discovered strength she did not know she possessed. He had faced decisions requiring patience, observation, and courage, and had learned to recognize and nurture potential in others. By the time dawn approached again, both felt a deep sense of closure and readiness. The Apache woman was prepared to continue her journey, equipped with knowledge, skill, and confidence. The rancher had fulfilled a role that went beyond mere protection. He had guided, taught, and shared in the growth of someone remarkable. Their bond, forged through shared experience and mutual respect, would endure in memory and influence the choices they made in the future. The plains remained vast, wild, and full of challenges, but the story of the Apache woman and the Western rancher had reached a moment of resolution. Survival had been achieved, trust had been built, and understanding had been shared across cultural and personal boundaries. The journey had been difficult, but it had also been transformative, leaving both stronger, wiser, and more capable of facing the world. As the sun rose once more, casting light across the endless grass and hills, the woman looked toward the horizon with determination and hope. The rancher watched her with quiet pride, understanding that she was ready for the next chapter of her life. Together, they had navigated fear, danger, and uncertainty, and together, they had learned the value of courage, trust, and human connection. And so the story concluded, not with an end to the challenges of life, but with the recognition that even in the harshest circumstances, growth, resilience, and understanding could flourish. The Apache woman continued her journey with newfound strength, while the rancher carried forward the lessons of patience, compassion, and the quiet power of guidance. The plains stretched endlessly, full of possibility, and both knew that the experiences they had shared would forever shape their lives.